Elementary music teacher friend, you love what you do, but you might feel unappreciated and, in fact, unseen some days. You may even feel like you're on a music teacher island and just want to connect with other music teachers who can relate to both your struggles and wins when it comes to teaching elementary music. I get you and understand completely the feelings you're having. That's why each and every week, the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast will provide you with solo and guest episodes that will help you realize you're not alone in your music teaching journey. Throughout each episode, my goal is for you to be able to walk away with actionable steps and ideas to help you feel like you're ready to take on the new week with whatever challenges may be thrown your way. Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Peresta, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether you're at home, in your car, in the shower, or wherever else you're listening, grab your cup of coffee or whatever other beverage is nearby and listen in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast.
Hi, I'm Steve Miletto from the Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey music teacher friend, I want to let you know about a free guide called 5 Steps to Simplifying Your Lesson Planning. We know as an elementary music teacher how stressful it can be planning lessons every single week for all the grade levels you teach that need to meet the state or national standards, that will reach different learning styles, and that are also fun and engaging for your students. If you've had thoughts like, am I doing this whole lesson planning thing right? Then check out this guide. It will help you with lesson planning with ease. So simply head to subscribe.thedomesticmusician.com/simplifying lesson planning or check out the link in the show notes. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited today to be joined by Adrian Gordon. We are going to talk about building a strong music program in the first 5 years, and I'm really excited to hear from him. And we were talking about how he just had a book that came out and all of the things he does in his career, and I'm really excited for you to get to know him better and for us to dive into this conversation. So before we get going, Adrian, I would love for you to introduce yourself to the listeners today.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm Adrian Gordon. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, and I am currently living in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I teach orchestra to 5th through 12th grade students. And I've kind of had several different hats. I've been a general music teacher for K through 4. I've been an assistant band director. I've been a choir director for elementary and middle school, and most currently string orchestra, which is really my passion. So awesome. That's my history, and I'm also a composer as well. I compose music for strings, the elementary, middle, and high school levels.
That's so cool. I love that. I love how you have your hat in a lot of different areas, and you're also an author. So tell us a little bit about the book you wrote that came out not too long ago, right?
Yeah, just a few weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving. It just kind of came up. It took me 3 years to write, but it came about because I was, like I said, I've kind of worn several different hats, and I saw a lot of overlap and connecting points through each transition. And in my last transition, it was a bit challenging. So I actually had to dig deep and think about, okay, I've done these things before. How do I clarify what I need to do? Maybe if I write it down, maybe if I talk these things through with other colleagues and friends. And that's what I did. And then as I started to progress, I realized, man, this is something that's really not out there as a resource for music educators, especially during the COVID time period. People are transitioning and moving around. And so I figured, hey, why don't I take all these ideas that I've written down and publish it, and hopefully it can help people. And I talk about in the book, I dedicate it to music educators because I feel as though we as music educators are supposed to leave the profession in better shape than we found it. And I kind of feel like this is one way that I can contribute and help out and do that through this book.
That's so cool. So we're going to talk about building a strong music program, but specifically in the first 5 years. So I know whether it is elementary music, secondary music, that first 5 years, like let's talk about year one, especially. Oh my gosh, it is overwhelming. And you go in there just
Yeah.
knowing what, kind of having an idea of what you should do, but it is just, like you said, there's a lot that goes into it. And so just give us any advice you have around what it takes to build a program in the first 5 years.
Well, I think in the first place, we have to think about our physical health, mental health, musical health, emotional health, and that precedes even thinking about a single note of music. And I equate it to when you're on an airplane, you hear the flight attendant get on the microphone and say, if the oxygen mask drops, be sure to place yours on before you help anybody else. And I think it's so pertinent to what we do as music educators, because we're no good to our students if we don't really take care of ourselves. So in the book, I talk about taking care of your physical well-being, like taking breaks when you need to, define the chaos, use the restroom. I remember when I made my last transition, I was working so hard, I would even delay using the bathroom, just
Hmm.
getting so busy, so overwhelmed. And that's really not a good idea and not healthy.
Hmm.
So we got to defy that chaos, take those breaks when you need to, eat well, prepare, plan ahead, get some healthy snacks to take along to work with you. And then also getting some sleep. I think that's a big part of being a functional music educator, let alone functional human being.
Right.
But I think what happens a lot of time as music educators, we don't really leave work at work. We take it home with us. And I think a lot of times our minds wander and keep us up. So I've kind of sworn by Google Task right now, and I just write down all these notes and tasks that I have to do, so it doesn't keep me up, and I can kind of rest easy and know that it'll be there in the morning, and I can get some sleep and be ready to hit it again the next day. So that's what I talk about in terms of physical health. And I think that's one of the most important things. And like I said, that's before you even sing or play a single note. And then I also talk about in the book your musical health. I've seen a lot of colleagues and friends out there who say things like, I teach, I don't play anymore, and I know everyone has their personal opinion about it, but I think that's such a mistake. I think in the midst of your transition and you're building the time of building your program, I think there's so much going on that you really do need an anchor to kind of help you remember who you are as a professional, and that's a musician. And what better way than to have your instrument on a daily basis? And it doesn't mean that you play your instrument at Carnegie Hall level performance, but just you pick it up. Musicians play. So I would say that maintaining your musical health and playing your instrument, even if it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, that's okay. But at least you're playing and you're staying grounded with your instrument. And I think it's important for your students to see that you play as well.
Mm.
You are their role model, and particularly in the beginning stages. So with my elementary students, it's such a vital role for me to play for them and to
Mhm.
mimic and model proper technique, conceptual ideas on the instrument. So it's important for me to play, and I can't really give that up. And it also keeps me sane. It's something that I love. I wouldn't have gone into this profession if I didn't love music and I didn't love people. So keeping that going is really important. And then, in the book, I also talk about, in terms of the beginning things that you need to really develop a program, your mental and emotional health. Um, I think it's important that we set those boundaries early on, and things like leaving early. Some days, not every day, but some days you just leave early.
Mm.
Sometimes I think it's important to just sit in your car and get refuge in your car. It's like you're home away from home. And a lot of times what I'll do is if I need to take 10-15 minutes and just sit in my car, listen to some music, or say a prayer, or just clear my mind, it's going to be quiet. No one's going to be bothering me, and I just take those 10 minutes. And if you can, if that's something that's feasible for you in your
Mhm.
schedule, um I also think it's important to spend quality time with your family and your friends. We get so caught up. Like I said, we don't typically leave work at work as music educators because it entails so much. A lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of creativity, and we end up giving our loved ones the short end of the stick. And I think it's important to reprioritize and say, you know what, I'm going to spend time with my family. I'm going to spend quality time with my friends, and um, basically fill my own cup.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of your emotional and mental health, and also taking mental health days. I think it's important that we don't take just sick days, but mental health days.
Mm-hmm.
And we say, you know what, I'm going to take a day off, and I'm just going to catch up on things that I need to do, and feel good about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, in terms of your personal health, that's the big ideas that I talk about in the book, for developing a strong program. Because, like I said, if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to be no good for your students or for anybody else in your community.
I love how you started off with talking about that, because typically, if you ask someone about what would you say to a new teacher or a teacher within their first 5 years of teaching music, it would be which all of this advice is needed, but all the logistical, do this, start with this, teach
Mm-hmm.
this concept, do this throughout the school year. All that's necessary, but like you said, if they don't focus on themselves first, then it's just going to be this ever growing stress bubble that never goes
Right.
away, because they're not tackling who they are as an individual before being a teacher. And so I love that you started with that before even giving any logistical, you know, hope about like the teaching aspect behind teaching.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important. Like I said, before you even play or sing a single note, that has to be in order. That house of cards has to be in order. Otherwise, like I said, you're not going to be good for anybody. And you want to have longevity in these positions, and you want to do well for your students and for your community. But it's important. You got to take care of yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I start the book like that. And one of the things I start with the book with, because I think it's really important. Mm-hmm.
In the first 5 years, what would you say a music teacher maybe needs to focus on each year in order to develop their program? Maybe they're like, I was in a situation where I walked into a school that hadn't had a music program for 7 years. And so whether it's a situation like that or a teacher's following in the footsteps of a teacher that was there before them, or they're just building a new program, what would you say to them? What would be like the starting point of do this day one, and then over the next 5 years, you can kind of develop your program in this way?
Well, I kind of bring it back to the self again before you even, pick up the baton or pick up an instrument. There's three questions that I like to ask, and I ask
Mm-hmm.
myself every time I transition. And those three questions are: why am I teaching music? Who am I as an educator? And then what is my vision? And if I can express those three things, everything else will fall into place logistically. So when I talk about why am I teaching music in the book, I talk about your why versus your what. I think a lot of times we get wrapped up in the day-to-day daily grind, and checking off boxes, and we may tend to
Mm.
forget why we're doing what we're doing. That yes, we do love music, we want to see our programs flourish, but more than anything, I think we are in the field of people,
That's
and
good.
we're in the field of caring for people, and music has the power to do that. So we have to remember why we're doing what we're doing, and that music happens to be the vehicle for touching lives. And I think if we're on board with that, then everything else kind of falls into place. We filter
Mm.
our program through that lens. And then the second question I talk about in the book is, who am I as an educator? So I give myself the descriptors of strong, gracious, and caring. So every single interaction that I have with my community has to be filtered through those descriptors. And it's important that you don't do that just at the beginning when the paint's wet. You're still getting to know people, and you're putting on that big old smile. But really, when things are difficult and things are
Mm.
challenging, who are you? Because setting that tone for your students and for your program is going to allow them to trust you and feel as though, okay, it's not just about the content in the class, it's about me as a person. And if your students trust you, they're really going to go along with you to the moon and back,
Yeah.
So, that's the second question that I ask. And then the third question, which kind of gets more technical and more logistical, I say, what is your clear vision? So I think it's important to have a clear and broad vision that can include just about everybody in the program. And I also encourage the music educators to involve the students, get their input and see, okay, what is it that they want as part of the program. And once you have a clear and broad vision, you got to think about, okay, what am I going to do to implement this?
Mm.
Um, and it's got to be strategic and it's got to be incremental. So that's the biggest component. I've seen really bad outcomes when you try and do too much at once. It's too much of a shock to the system, especially if you're following behind a beloved teacher.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to keep whatever traditions have been, unless they're egregious. you know,
Yeah, right.
I've seen some programs. I've walked in some programs where the mantra has been, "Hey, there's no practice," and that doesn't necessarily jive well with uh, building proficiency on an instrument. Just
Mm-hmm.
like it wouldn't with any other subject area. So, and it doesn't mean that you have to be practicing an hour or two a day, but if we can make it something small, and again make those changes incremental, I think it's really important to the development of the students. Getting that vision to be really clear and then sharing it often,
Mm-hmm.
and then letting your students know when they're hitting those benchmarks. So if they're doing something that's really stellar, talk about it. Say, hey, this really meets our mission statement or vision or goals. And then again, you filter all your actions and your goals through that lens. So if there's something that you're trying to do, like I even have to check myself, oh, I really want to play that piece of music. Is that more for me or is that more for the students in the program and for their benefit, things that are going to be really educational for them? And if it doesn't meet those standards, you kind of got to push it to the side, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would recommend. Those three questions in terms of, and that doesn't really speak to the um, teaching style. It doesn't really
Yeah.
speak to, okay, how am I going to go about communicating the music? It's really just about who am I as a person, why am I doing this, and then bringing the students in. And honestly, unless you're doing something egregious, if you've got those three questions answered, no matter what your style and your communication style is, you're gonna bring students along. They're gonna follow you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it goes back to the heart of who they are as a person. And like, I love that you said that. Why are you doing this? Your why versus your what. That was a good
Mhm.
statement when you said that. That's so true to go back to that. And a newer teacher may not know their why at first. Well, they may know why they wanted to become a music teacher, but as they're in the classroom, they'll discover their why even more as they're in there and they get
Right.
going. So, how can a music teacher keep the momentum going after the first 5 years?
Well, I think it's important. I talk about this in the book as well, building community. I think if you build community and involve people, I think that's the best way to do it because it all can't be sustained from you. So I think the more you can involve students in different tasks around the program, like, hey, maybe you're going to be a social chair, or you're going to have parents who are going to volunteer, maybe do some filing, or parents volunteer to do some chaperoning, or students who come in and help clean. It can't be all from one person, otherwise you will be burned out.
Hmm.
And I say in the book, there's no award for the most stressed out and burned out teacher. There's no badge of honor for that.
Right.
And again, we want longevity. So I
Yeah.
think it's important to build that community and involve people. And the way I talk about in the book is really simple things. Some of them are free. So building community can look like asking your students how they're doing. Maybe attending one of their extracurricular uh, sports events, and maybe it's something that a couple of them are doing. So you're not going to a million different events. Also, team building events, like sometimes we'll do a movie night, or we might do ice skating or bowling, so that we're all feeling like we're accountable to each other and we're all a part of the team and that we can all contribute. And it doesn't just come from me as their teacher. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
So I think that's important. And then something, quirky things that I do to build community, like I will start each class out with a dad joke, a cringy dad joke. So, at first my students were like, oh my gosh, this guy. But after a while, it starts to become, part of their day. And I guarantee you, if you make it cringy enough, those who aren't fully awake, they will be.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Those dad jokes will pierce their souls. So
That's so funny.
so yeah, those are, and that's free. That doesn't cost you anything. It's
Mhm.
just a fun thing to connect with them, and build that community so that you really do have longevity, and you can, feel like it's a team and group effort, similar to what you see in an athletic program. It's not all from the head coach. There's different people making all these, moving parts come together. So I think
Yeah.
that's important for us as music educators as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're just starting out your career, longevity is the name of the game. It is
Right.
knowing that you touched on this earlier too, that I was guilty of this, trying to do way too much in my first year, in my first 5 years, trying to get through
Yeah.
way too much. Okay, I got to build the program. I got to have this. Students need to be in this place. I need to get these instruments. And it just became, I was stressed out because going back to focusing on yourself, it doesn't all have to be done right away. You can give yourself goals
Right.
to reach. And then what the neat thing is after year 5, you feel like you kind of know what you're doing a little bit more. You can loosen up a
Yeah.
little bit more. You do you feel that?
Yeah, I think, it's important. That's the big idea that I try and follow this even in my own transition right now, as I've just transitioned to, Charlotte, North Carolina. I think the big idea is to give yourself grace and
Mm,
realize that you can't do all these things in a day. You can't do them in a month. You can't do them in a year. There's a process, and there's a flow to the development of your program. I think, in the book I talk about year one. It's mainly introducing those incremental changes and buy-in. You want people to buy into your vision, and not everybody will, and that's
yeah.
okay. But as long as you have committed to those descriptors that we talked about at the beginning of our conversation,
Yeah.
like I said, it's mine are strong, gracious, and caring. If I've committed to those things, and I've been that to each student, if everyone doesn't fall in line and come on board, then it's okay. It's not going to be for everybody. um, and I think year number, like, 2 and 3 will be more about, recruitment and retention, from the initial changes that you've made. And then as you get to year like 4 and 5, it's more about maintenance, and just keeping the program that you've built going,
Mm,
um, and outcomes. Now you're seeing outcomes of your work. So
yeah.
it's like a 3 to 5 year process. There's
Mm-hmm.
no specific number, but that's what we
Mm-hmm.
typically see. In 3 to 5 years, you take ownership of that program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it just takes time, and just give yourself grace, like you mentioned, and
Hmm.
know that things will not happen overnight. And I think that's where a lot of frustration with newer teachers comes into place. Or like you said, if you're at a new school, it can feel like you're starting over,
Yeah.
is the fact that you're just frustrated because what you where you want to go, and it's just going to take time to get there, but it's about playing the long game and being
Yeah.
patient.
Because
Yeah.
even if you are an experienced teacher and you're transitioning, you know you you're not the same person that you were at your last transition. So things are going
Yeah.
to be different. I've heard that quote, and forgive me, I can't remember who said it, but a man never enters a river twice,
Hmm.
because the water is different, and the man himself or the woman herself is different as well. So that even that experience entering that body of water has changed. So turn a corner, and you relate that to your transition at your new school. You're different. Your life circumstances may have changed. The school culture is different. The administration, the student body, everything now is different. So it can be frustrating to think, yeah, I'm a professional, I've done this before, but why is it not sticking the way I'd like? And it may just be a matter of, hey, it's just going to take time. It's not
Hmm.
anything I've done wrong per se, but it's just going to take time, because I am a different person. My circumstances are different, different community, and all of that will take time for me to learn. But in the meantime, I give myself grace and do the best that I can. And at the end of the day, remember, there's no badge of honor for the most stressed out teacher. And the most important thing you can do is take care of yourself.
Yes, I love how you keep going back to that because it's so true. And that's something that is not touched on enough. It's just self-care is kind of just thrown around like a, common term now. But it is so important to take care of yourself and to put yourself first and to know that you really can't pour from an empty glass. And if you're feeling depleted, your students will see that. You're going to feel it. You're not going to show up as your best. And it just affects you in all areas. So it's so true. You got to focus on
Yeah.
yourself before anyone else, for sure.
And I've had the luxury of having, the ability to see students graduate. And I have two students that stood out to me. One of them said, as I left my last position, she said to me, you've really taught me the value of family. And
Mm,
that had nothing to do with music, but she was still learning from me in the way that I took care of my family. I talk about my family. I bring them along. I talk about how important they are to me. So that was really important to hear students say that, and that had nothing to do with me being up on the podium conducting. And then another student told me that being in my orchestra program from freshman year to senior year really changed her. And she's not a music major, and she's not as passionate as I am about music, but
yeah.
the experience changed her. And it's important that we're demonstrating those life skills. And like I said, music happens to be the vehicle for these students.
Yeah, so good. So we've talked about a lot today. Is there any other advice you want to share with the listeners before we go?
Yeah, I would say just trust in your professionalism, be professional, and remember that you can't do it all in a year, and you can't do it all in a month, you can't do it all in a week, but remain professional, because you can't dictate how events come at you, but you can dictate how you respond. So that's an important idea to remember throughout your transition and through your year.
Okay, so good. Let everybody know where they can connect with you after this episode.
Sure, if anyone wants to connect with me, I'm online. I'm all over social media, but the main way would be through my website at adriangordonmusic.com.
Awesome. And make sure you check out his book. And thank you so much for coming on today. This has been a great conversation, Adrian.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, hey there. Thank you so much for listening into the Elementary Music Teacher podcast. There is an exclusive Facebook group just for listeners of this podcast and any elementary music teacher called the Elementary Music Teacher Community Facebook group. Come on over and join us there, where we have conversations around the podcast episodes and encourage each other each and every week. And also head to my website, thedomesticmusician.com. I have some free resources there that you can download to help you gain traction in your classroom today, as well as the blog and the membership site and all kinds of other goodies to help you keep going in your music teaching journey. I cannot wait to keep connecting with you and encouraging you and spurring you on in your journey of teaching elementary music. Hang in there, have an amazing week, and I will see you soon.